The UAE and Israel's newly signed free trade agreement is expected to generate enormous economic and political opportunities. The UAE says the agreement will accelerate growth, create jobs, and lead to a new era of peace, stability, and prosperity across the region. And we're joined by a senior economic advisor to the UAE's ministries, Mr. Ahmed Muarrek Abu Ghaida. Thanks so much for joining us today. Now, we watched the UAE and Israel ink this historic FTA that's expected to lift annual bilateral trade to more than $10 billion within 5 years. What sectors are really set to benefit the most from this deal?
Good afternoon first, Amia. It's good to be here. Regarding your questions, I think there are several sectors that are bound to benefit from this agreement on both sides of the table. Mainly, I would think technology-related products would benefit a lot, given the focus on technology in both countries. Israel has advanced technologies in many different sectors, and the UAE is keen to attract technology-based industries. So I think there should be a lot of trade in that arena. Another area is agriculture. The UAE also is interested very much in developing the agricultural sector and what I would call like smart agriculture or high-tech agriculture. And I think the other party has been able over the years to develop technological processes and related to agriculture that have allowed them to be a leading entity or a leading player in the area of desert agriculture. So this should be another area of interest to the UAE. Of course, the UAE has several products also that it can share with the rest of the world, and also with the other party, including petrochemicals, aluminum, steel, and so forth. And these are the kind of products I think we would be mostly looking at the first stage.
Now, through this agreement, tariffs will be eliminated on 96% of goods. Will this decrease the amount of trade that the UAE and Israel have with other countries? I mean, will their bilateral trade be more beneficial?
This is really a very interesting question, because I don't think that the UAE trade with other countries would be negatively affected by this trade with Israel, because I think here one would want to remember that the logistics machine or sector in the UAE is the key contributor to economic growth, and it's the key re-export center in the region, for Asia and for the Middle East and for East Africa. And so Israeli exporters would benefit a great deal from this positioning in the UAE. So now they can export in bulk, and they will be sure that the UAE will be the distribution center for any products that they would like to mass produce and mass export.
This new FTA is called the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. It's Israel's first big trade accord with an Arab state. What do you feel this means politically? I mean, how does it position the UAE, and does it send a signal to the rest of the region about doing business with Israel?
However, I think this accord adds significantly to the soft power tools of the UAE, okay? And it gives the UAE a significant comparative advantage against its other peers in the region and beyond. And so the UAE is bound to benefit significantly and politically from the signing of this accord. You see, each country has its own specific circumstances. And for example, Jordan signed an agreement 20 years ago, okay? Or almost 20 years ago. Egypt signed an agreement in the 80s. And many countries are trading already with Israel in the region, but not officially, okay? And those countries are not the UAE. The UAE, as I said in the beginning, is a key logistics and trading hub in the region and the world, okay? And so they are bound to benefit significantly, okay, from this agreement. And also, I think the Israelis will even benefit more than the UAE because they will have, they will have a distribution center, okay, for all the products that they would like to put out on the shelf for every party around the world.
Thanks so much for joining us today.